Right, it's good to know that Catherine Nicholson there is on stakeout. Thanks for that, Jessica Le Mazurier. It's not looking good. True. Now, this probably won't be the week that Europe self-destructs. It never does. And even if EU leaders fail to take bold steps to contain their sovereign debt crisis, Brussels will somehow muddle along as it always does. But there are some very dark clouds on the horizon. Moody's downgrading Spain's credit rating once again, and warning that if France doesn't get its financial house in order, it could be getting a bad report card sooner rather than later. Here in France this Wednesday, a lot of people asking, well, what's a credit rating agency and should I be worried? We're going to try to give answers to those questions. Also, find out if that one-size-fits-all solution that'll keep states and banks afloat is really in the pipeline. And on that score, see if the French president and German chancellor can kiss and make up before the weekend and that all-important summit to discuss the matter. Today in the France 24 debate, Europe's moody blues with former IMF economist Stéphane Cossé, today a member of the centrist Modem party. Thank you for being with us. René Defossé, strategist at Natixis Bank, joins us from London. Thanks for being with us. And here to give a picture of how much money out there there really is out there will be Didier Davidoff of the European Savings Institute.
Hello.
Thank you for being with us. And for the big picture on it all, Ali Fatemi of the American Graduate School of Business. Welcome as always, sir. The France 24 debate that you can follow on Facebook and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrancoisF24. Let's begin with the day's diary of the French president's schedule. Nicolas Sarkozy first going to that private clinic in Paris's posh 16th arrondissement. The world's still awaiting news of the birth of the child of First Lady Carla Bruni. Then an unexpected jaunt to Frankfurt, where he's meeting with his German counterpart, as well as the president of the European Central Bank, the head of the IMF. That unscheduled trip sort of illustrating how serious it all is right now. Stéphane Cossé, how bad is it really?
Well, we have certainly mixed signals. Yesterday, Nicolas Sarkozy said that we were about to face a challenge which was the most important in the last decade. So if he said that, that was probably because he thought that this could be sorted out actually. But on the other hand, now he's in Frankfurt, meaning that probably he is facing difficulties to find an issue. Now, that being said, France has no sovereignty at all anymore, in a sense, from a financial standpoint. Why? Because you have Moody's and other rating agencies saying, well, you guys have no leeway anymore.
So that announcement by Moody's is a killer, in other words.
It is a killer, and he may go to Frankfurt and say no to Angela Merkel, but he has no choice, and in the end he will have to admit that what Germany is saying is probably the only solution, because he has no other alternative at this stage from a financial standpoint.
René Defossé, do you agree that following that announcement by Moody's, that now it's the Germans that are going to write the rules for this big weekend's big summit?
I'm not completely sure that the risk Moody's is invoking regarding France is that high. Actually, there are two different situations. First, if you look to the fundamentals of France, France has clearly the ability to stabilize over the two or three coming years its debt to debt to GDP ratio. It won't be a very big deal. It's very easy, for example, to meet the 4.5% GDP deficit to GDP target for next year. One need only to make some more effort in terms of tax policy. I think that's the first point. The second point is that France is concerned, obviously, is involved in the situation within the euro area. Investors have the feeling that France's risk is linked to France's banks' risk, which are obviously very exposed to the sovereign risk in the rest of Europe. This is true, but this concerns all the Eurozone countries. If you look, for example, to the situation of German banks, they also are very exposed to European countries' banks sovereign debts. So clearly, I think it's not. There are two different things. First, if you look to the French fundamentals, the risks are not that high. The only risk, or supposed risk, is the fact that France is obviously exposed through the situation of the banks to the non-core countries' sovereign debts.
Ali Fatemi.
Well, unfortunately, I can't share all that optimism. Number one, the French economy is not such a good position. There are only two other countries with more deficit per GDP, United States, which is 100%, and Singapore, which is 94%, and France is just there. Every other country that has that rating has a much lower. Number two, I don't think France can reduce its budget deficit to 4.5% because that presupposes a 1.75% rate of growth, and I don't think France is going to even make 1%. So I wish I could share that optimism, but the facts point the other way.
Not even 1%. One man who does agree with René Desfossés is the French finance minister. He said that he made a statement saying that told French television on Tuesday that France can indeed get its house in order. We'll hear from François Baroin in a moment. First, though, let's see what having your creditworthiness reviewed means in this report prepared and presented by Will Edwards.
One cause for concern is that France's 2012 budget, being debated in Parliament on Tuesday, is based on the assumption that the economy will grow by 1.75% next year. But even the government has now admitted that this is likely to be considerably lower. Back in August, a raft of austerity measures were announced to bring down the country's deficit. But if growth fails to meet expectations, the cuts may have to go deeper. Another worry is the health of French banks. They face the highest exposure of any European nation to Greek debt. Earlier this month, Franco-Belgian bank Dexia was forced to accept a bailout as the Eurozone debt crisis meant it couldn't borrow enough to finance its liabilities. With elections on the horizon, France's AAA credit rating is a key priority for President Sarkozy. But the rating also has wider importance across Europe. If the cost of borrowing goes up for France, it'll make it even more difficult to find the funds for the Eurozone's EFSF bailout fund.
And if France gets a bad report card, that would leave but 5 other nations in Europe that benefit from that fabled AAA rating. 6 nations out of 17. That's not a great record when you think about it going into this weekend's summit, Didier Davidoff.
Yes, I would say that the situation is not really new. The markets already had a big spread between the Bund bonds issued by the German government and the French state. So what is more new is the way rating agencies communicate or do not communicate on their work. Sometimes they announce publicly that they will study the situation of a country. Sometimes they don't. And my view is that probably there is a lack of regulation on the activity of these
Do you pay attention
agencies.
when a rating agency says we're looking at France like Moody's has done?
Well, they say that after the market has already said that. So I'm not sure about the real added value they have in the market, since all information they use is a public information.
But you heard Stéphane Cosset at the outset here say that this is reducing Nicolas Sarkozy's bargaining power significantly when he goes into that meeting in Frankfurt with Angela Merkel.
Yes, but it's because of the irrational aspects of the functioning of the markets.
Ali Fatemi?
Well, I don't see what's so irrational if you don't have the money. In other words, France cannot go on spending more money to save Greece, Spain, Italy without losing its own rating. And if it loses its rating, it means another 24 billion. The difference between a AAA pays 3% interest and a minus that comes there becomes 4.5%. And the difference is about 24 billion just in interest alone. And the other problem, of course, is that the spread is now only 100 basic points, but so was Greece, about 100 with German things. And if you look at the the CDS, the credit swap thing, you see that it's already close to 2 million for each 100 million of French debt. And all these signals, I think, are serious warnings that France cannot go on. And I think the reflections of that we will see. Most probably Germany will have to go this whole thing alone. Whether they go or not, that's a different story.
All right, not much money out there. Before I go to you, let's hear what the French finance minister had to say when he spoke with French television on Tuesday.
We will do everything and we will put everything in place to keep this rating. France has the means to do what is required. We are the first country in terms of public spending. So if needed, we will take the necessary measures to reduce this spending in order to meet these objectives.
The necessary measures to reduce spending. Isn't there a presidential election coming up?
Yeah, that's a good point, and there is a trade-off to be found between Nicolas Sarkozy's commitment to say, no, I will meet my 4.5% deficit target on the one hand, and on the other hand, pressure before the elections. But I think that in the end, and eventually, he will say, I will reduce spending, but if I do so, that means all over next year. So I don't have to do it necessarily in the first 4 months of the year. So it is easier to say I will reduce spending than I will increase taxes. We mentioned that the GDP growth will be 1% and not 1.75%. This will mean to find 5 to 6 billion euros. This is about 0.5% of VAT increase. That could be done easily. The government is saying, we'll reduce spending. This is another option, but this can be postponed after the election if needed. That being said, the only way Sarkozy can regain credibility, this is to say commitment to my 4.5% GDP of GDP deficit.
All right, with the presidential election.
With the presidential election
coming
yes.
up, and a campaign and campaign promises. The sympathy that could be garnered after also becoming the first sitting president in France to have a baby may run preciously short. The new nominee of the opposition socialist, François Hollande, visiting Madrid this Wednesday to back the outgoing socialists over there. They have a general election that's coming up November the 20th.
We, the progressives, we hold to the logic of regulation in the financial sector, affecting various types of activity. There are rules that must be put in place for the banks, especially if they need to be recapitalized. Rules that must be put in place for hedge funds, tax havens, or speculative financial products.
All right, changing the rules in the perspective that perhaps banks will need to be recapitalized. René Desfossés, where's the money?
I think that there is. We are in a eurozone, in a monetary area. The problem with this monetary area is that it has not been completed. We have a single currency. This single currency has been launched in 1999. This was a very good thing for this area, but this area could not be stable. Only due to the launch of a single currency. So we have to improve the integration of this area. And I think that if you consider the Eurozone as a whole, there is no problem. There is no problem of money. There is no problem of savings. You have everything you need if you consider the position of the Euro area as a whole compared to, against the rest of the world. Clearly, we are in a very comfortable position, at least in a very much more comfortable position as the United States or the UK or Japan or a lot of other countries. So the problem is, actually the question should be, do we want to integrate further this area? Do we want, for instance, to launch Eurobonds or to launch bonds which would trigger a kind of mutualism among the Eurozone countries? If the answer is yes, there is no more problem with money. Clearly, there is no problem with anything. Consider, for example, that there is a real mutualization of the sovereign risk within the euro area. The Portuguese, the Greek, the Italian risk would immediately disappear. So I think the question here, the question now, and it will be one of the topic of the discussion at the weekend and for the coming week, of course, is to which degree do we want to integrate this area? Do we really want, for example, to increase the power of the EFSF to create a leverage with the EFSF and so forth? And if we do have this commitment, there is no problem of money.
Didier Davidoff, there's not much talk of Eurobonds coming up at at this weekend's summit now between France and Germany. The game has moved on since then.
Sure. And I would add that I fully agree with what René Desfossés just said. There are savings in Europe. French savers, German savers save almost 16% of their revenue each year. So I think it would be a mistake to just look at the depth of the states, the public states. We should have a more comprehensive view and see that there is a lot of money available in the euro area. But is this money adequately used? The fear that we can have is that if we reduce too much the spending, or if we increase the taxes, then the growth will diminish, because the savings will again increase among households, and the consumption will decrease, and the production and the unemployment will arise. I think that's the key point in the euro area.
Ali Fatemi, do you agree the money might be out there?
Well, if it were out there, they would be buying securities. And if they were to buy securities, the interest on the securities wouldn't be so high. The problem is there are only two solutions to the current problem. What our colleague said from London, I believe, is fine. You have to have changes, stature changes, you have to have fiscal policy and all that, but that requires time. We saw what the Slovakia parliament did. You have to change the Treaty of Maastricht in order to give more powers for fiscal policy. That is the real solution. But let me tell you, there are two possibilities right now. One possibility is to help the banks recapitalize, so if there is a partial or real default of Greece or any other place, bank can do it. The second one is for that gentleman over there, this European Central Bank, to keep buying bonds. That would solve all the problem.
But will it be done? We'll get back to that, and we'll pick up.
He can't do it. It's against the Constitution.
It's against the EU Constitution. We'll go back into what is being discussed in Frankfurt there this Wednesday evening between the ECB, Nicolas Sarkozy, Angela Merkel, when the France 24 debate resumes.